July 2, 1943, the Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily roared with the sounds of war. Above the Mediterranean countryside, a German Fala-Wolf 190 raced through the skies, its pilot confident, unaware that death was diving silently from above. He never saw the American P-40 Warhawk until it was too late. A stream of .50 caliber machine gun fire tore through his fuselage. Flames burst across the German plane as it spiraled toward the ground. The pilot had no chance. Watching from the cockpit of his Warhawk, First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall knew what had just happened. At only 22 years old, the young man from Brazil, Indiana, had scored his first kill. But this was no ordinary victory. Hall had just done what German Luftwaffe commanders thought impossible. A black pilot had shot down one of their elite fighters. The swastika that Hall painted on his P-4L Warhawk that afternoon was just the beginning. It marked the first of 112 enemy aircraft that would eventually fall to men the Germans would learn to call the Schwarze Vogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. It was a nickname born not of respect at first, but of disbelief. Nazi ideology classified black people as unbench, subhuman, incapable of mastering complex machinery or demonstrating bravery in combat. In Germany, the Nuremberg law had even forbidden marriages between Germans and people of African descent. But in the skies over Europe, those racial theories were about to shatter against cold, hard reality. What German pilots didn't know as they prepared to intercept American bombers in 1943 was that the 99th Fighter Squadron, soon to be part of the 302nd Fighter Group, was unlike any unit they'd faced before. These were not ordinary pilots. They had been trained harder, pushed further, and judged more harshly than almost any of their white counterparts in the U.S. Army Air Forces. For them, every mission carried two battles, one against German aircraft and one against the crushing weight of prejudice. They flew not only to defend their country, but to prove to an entire world that skill, discipline, and courage knew no color. Their statistics would soon tell the story. Over 15,000 combat sorties, 178 missions, and 112 aerial victories. They would go on to escort hundreds of bombing missions with fewer losses than almost any other fighter group in the war. But the road to that moment, to that first swastika painted on Hall's Warhawk, had begun years earlier, not in combat, but in the segregated, hostile environment of the United States itself. Back in 1925, the U.S. Army War College had published a shameful report titled The Employment of Negro. Manpower in War had concluded that black men were, quote, inherently weak in character and inferior in mentality to the white man. Official, Tufi military doctrine claimed that black soldiers lacked the intelligence for technical roles and the courage for combat leadership. With views like these entrenched in America's armed forces, it seemed impossible that black men would ever fly fighters for their country. But even as prejudice ruled official policy, individual pioneers had already proven otherwise. During World War I, Eugene Bullard had flown for France because the United States refused to let him join its air service. In 1921, Bessie Coleman earned her pilot's license in France because no American flight school would accept her. By the 1930s, the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Chicago was training dozens of black civilian pilots, demonstrating that flying ability had no racial boundary. Civil rights leaders pressed the government relentlessly. Figures like Walter White of the Niltoy ACP, a Philip Randolph, and Judge William H. Hasty lobbied tirelessly for inclusion. Black newspapers asked the Roosevelt administration a damning question. How could America fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home? The pressure worked. On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 cracked open the door. It required the Civil Aeronautics Authority to include at least one school for training black pilots. It was a small concession wrapped in segregation, but it was a beginning. When Franklin Roosevelt campaigned for his unprecedented third term in 1940, he needed black votes in key northern cities. The War Department announced an all-black flying unit, the 99th Pursuit Squadron. Officially, it was called an experiment. The military's expectation was simple. They assumed it would fail. The man chosen to lead them was Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., the son of America's first black general. Davis had survived 4 years of silent treatment at West Point, where white cadets refused to speak to him outside official duties. He knew isolation, heck knew prejudice, and he knew what was at stake. When Davis took his squadron of 26 pilots to North Africa in April 1943, he carried not just his own honor, but the aspirations of 13 million black Americans. At first, their white commanders tried to sideline them. Colonel William Mister, who oversaw the 33rd Fighter Group, distrusted the 99th from the start. He assigned them menial patrol missions and kept them away from real combat. But soon there was no hiding from battle. On June 2, 1943, the Tuskegee pilots flew their first combat mission against Italian targets. They held formation. They protected their bombers and they did not break under fire. It was the first sign that this experiment was no failure. Then came July 2, 1943, the day Charles Hall proved the world wrong. When his bullets ripped into that German fighter and sent it plunging into the Sicilian earth, every Tuskegee Airman knew something had changed. Their victory wasn't just over one Luftwaffe pilot. It was over years of doubt, mockery, and slander. Black ground crews who had endured insults and sneers erupted in celebration. History had been made. From that day forward, the Tuskegee Airmen's reputation grew. At Anzio in January 1944, they faced superior German Focke-Wulf 190s in outdated P-40s and shot down as many as 13 enemy aircraft in 2 days. Even their own critics were silenced. Reports that had once called them unaggressive were proven wrong by hard combat. The War Department could no longer deny their skill. By mid-1944, the Tuskegee Airmen were flying the sleek, powerful P-51 Mustang. With its crimson-painted tails, their aircraft became known simply as the Red Tails. At first, bomber crews didn't know who these escorts were. They only knew one thing: the Red Tails never abandoned them. While other fighter groups sometimes chased German planes to boost their kill counts, the Red Tails stayed close, guarding the bombers all the way home. Word spread quickly among the bomber crews. If you can, request the Red Tails. Their greatest test came in March 1945 when they escorted bombers deep into Berlin. Waiting for them were the Messerschmitt Me-262 jets, the world's first operational jet fighters faster than anything the Allies had. But the Tuskegee Airmen adapted. They studied the jets' weaknesses, ambushed them in their turns, and that day destroyed 3 in a single mission. It was more than most American fighter groups managed in the entire war. No every mission was a triumph. Dozens of Tuskegee pilots became prisoners of war, some killed, some captured. Yet, even in German camps, they experienced a strange irony. White American prisoners often treated them with more equality there than they had back home. By war's end, the numbers told the story better than any speech. Over 2,500 missions flown, more than 15,000 sorties. 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air, another 150 destroyed on the ground, 96 distinguished flying crosses earned. Only 27 bombers lost under their escort, far fewer than average. The Tuskegee Airmen had done more than fight the Luftwaffe. They had fought prejudice, ignorance, and hatred, and won. Their legacy lived on not just in statistics, but in change. In 1948, President Truman signed the order to integrate the U.S. military. Influenced directly by the Tuskegee Airmen's record, Benjamin Davis would go on to become the first black general in the U.S. Air Force. Decades later, America would finally recognize them with the Congressional Gold Medal. The Germans, who once mocked them as black birdmen, ended the war, acknowledging their skill. The bomber crews, who survived because of them, called them Red Tail Angels, and history would remember them as men who fought 2 enemies at once: fascism abroad, Androcism at home, and defeated both. The Tuskegee Airmen proved that courage has no color, that excellence cannot be denied, and that even in the darkest skies of war, justice can find its wings.